Brad, can you take us through how you lit certain scenes for A California Christmas? We have this one here where Lauren is on the phone.
Yeah, that's a scene in Callie's bedroom. I remember it's on the second floor. And when Sean said he wanted to shoot in that bedroom, I was like, okay, I'm going to have to get an extra high stand. So we specifically ordered an Avenger stand for this shot. And then also there's a scene in Mom's bedroom where she's sick and she's bedbound. That one also, we needed that Avenger stand because a normal stand would not get us up to an altitude where we could get a good angle. Like we'd be pointing up. So that's a special stand. We shot it in the day with an M18, which is the 1800 watt HMI PAR. I remember in that moment worrying that there was a little too much glare. And even when we did the color grade, I was like, Sean, you want to, make that go away a little bit? He's like, oh no, I love it, And he was right. It's beautiful. But glare is just one of those things, just like a flare. It can be aesthetically pleasing, or it can be, an obnoxious artifact, and it's just a fine line. And it's really nice in this scene. That was one thing I thought about. But this is a very simply lit scene. I mean, it was. I think we may have put some negative fill behind the camera. Put some black up just to put a little bit of contrast in it because that light was bouncing off of those white walls. But not a lot going on there. We just kept it simple and let that window do its thing. We pick her up with a camera move, a pan that we pick her up coming in the door, and then we follow her over to where she's standing in front of that window. So that's a nice transition too. And I think that was the only shot we did. I don't know if we did 2 sizes of that. If we did, it was only 2 sizes. Not a lot of coverage. That was one of those scenes we shot simple and quick, and she just nailed it. So
here we have the barn scene.
Yeah, I remember when we were scouting this angle and Sean saw that. I mean, behind us is kind of just a blind little cubicle, almost like a stall, but it wasn't enclosed. So I'm not really sure what its purpose was. And then to the left was a little area with some machinery that was kind of, I guess, because it's a dairy farm, I don't know, maybe they milk the cows and pump it into that stuff. But I don't know if it ended up in the movie, but that shot is actually, it was on a Dana dolly on speed rails. So when we came to it, we just started pushing in. And I'm not sure if they used that push in or if they cut in after we stopped. And it's always tricky when you're in the shade with something bright outside. You're always kind of worried that you don't want to underexpose this and then you don't want to overexpose that and clip it. So it's a matter of, finding that balance and then also maybe bringing up the inside a little bit. And so the rim light on that was coming from an M18, again, that HMI PAR. And I don't believe there was any diffusion. It was probably just clean and hard. That was just coming from off camera to put that rim on him. And then I had an Arri Sky panel, back up against the wall, just putting a little bit of fill to lift it up. I shot it on a red helium, which has the capacity to shoot what they call HDRX, which theoretically extends the dynamic range because it shoots alternating images. It shoots actually 48 frames. And so one is one exposure and then the other is an offset exposure, and then it alternates. And that offset, like if you stop it down 2 stops, it kind of extends your dynamic range by 2 stops. And then there's a process in post where you can bring that information back in. I don't think I used that here. I remember thinking I used it a little more than I actually did, because when we got into the color grade, I don't know if we ever actually invoked that, even though it was in some shots. But again, it's just one of those tricky things. And if I had shot that on film, I'd have been very nervous and I'd have had a spot meter in there just metering all those values. But as it was, I was just looking at the monitor. I've been shooting for so long exposing to monitors, and I just trust that if it's a properly calibrated monitor and then I have a histogram or a waveform that I can see the values. I've done it enough times that I just trust that process. So I set the exposure where I wasn't losing any information. And what I may have done, I don't remember this specifically, but in something like that, is I might underexpose the foreground just a little bit, just to pull those highlights down, just to ensure that they're not clipping, because I know in post, as long as I don't crush those shadows, I can still bring them up a little bit.
This is also, seems like another outside the barn or around the barn shot.
Yeah, that is a barn, but it's a different barn. But it's funny that you should say that, because we had barn as a location in the script, and they're like physically completely different places. One was like for the dairy cows, and then this was more of a storage shed. And honestly, Cooper did it. Michael Cooper, our production designer, did a really good job of dressing it, because from the outside, it looks like a barn, but you go inside, it just looks like a great big storage shed, So he went in there and pitched that hay in there. It was kind of fortuitous, because it was such a big space, and I was like, my God, where am I going to hide a light? I want to put a backlight on him, but how am I going to hide a light? And what I ended up deciding is kind of like the story I told you about the shoot where I put the tape on the light, is I just shoved that light right back there in the shot and had them wrap it with black duvetine. So it's there, the light's there, it's just dark and you can't, or the stand, it's dark and you can't see it. And then up above the frame is the light that's lighting them. When we shot the master scene, I can't remember if this was supposed to be day or night. I can't remember. But when we shot the master, it was dusk. And so I had to match that. So by the time we shot this, it was night. It was pitch black. So there really wouldn't have been any frontal light on them at all. And what I did is I put a 12 by Ultra Bounce out in front of the door. And then I took one of the sky panels and I color matched it to the daylight by eye. Because again, I've just done it so many times that I feel I have really good instincts matching the color, and dimmed it way down, so it wasn't super bright. In retrospect, after I shot it, I kind of wished I had made that backlight a little warmer, but maybe that's noodling. They say a work of art is never finished, it's just abandoned. And so, it's probably perfect just like it is. And that was just me, wanting to nudge it some more. But it was very fortunate, because it looks nice in this 50-52 shot. And I was thinking, when I go in for coverage, am I going to have to, move that light around so that it's flattering? And like so many scenes on this movie, we just didn't have a lot of time. And we went in for coverage and it looked pretty good. And the only thing I really did, instead of moving the light, is I would just angle them. I would cheat their position a little bit to make it a little bit more flattering. So the geometry of their position in that space changed from the master, but it's such a tiny cheat that the audience can't tell. And it was, like I said, it made the light a little bit more flattering on their faces.
We have the interior bar.
Yeah, I was scared to death to do this bar from the time I read it in the script, and I was like, can I please have a pre-light day or a half a pre-light day? And there was no way, because it was a working bar, and it was too far away from our location to send anybody off. So it was like, you're going to have to do it on the day of. I have worked with RGB LED lights pretty regularly now for about 3 or 4 years, but I had never lit in a bar scene interior with them yet. And that was a lot of lights. And I'm just like, in the old days, you'd be sticking stuff up there and sleeving it with gels, and then you'd have cables to run across the ceiling and tack up and hide, and then you'd drop them all down, in a place that's like, where are we never going to look? Or if we do look there, now we're going to have to move it. So, there was all of that. But we used the Astera Titans that are battery powered. So there was no cables at all. Because they were RGB LED, we could just dial in the color, and boom, there it was, blue, no gelling, no nothing. And our gaffer, Callum Barris, had everything connected to an app on the phone, so he could just, change the brightness, turn some of them off, because in different angles we would turn them off just because we didn't want that spill. And right now I'm talking about the blue lights, the cobalt blue lights, which I love that color. I love cobalt blue, and that was kind of an easy color. The thing that worried me was I didn't know how long the batteries were going to last. I'm thinking, my God, we're going to have to turn them off between takes, and then at lunch you're going to have to put them on charge. And he said, yeah, no, they'll last, and we never put them on charge. Oh, and he zip tied them in. That's the other thing, is they found a way to zip tie them into the ceiling and I don't even know what they fixed those zip ties to, but I was also worried about how are you going to get them up there without, grip crap that we see in the shot, because you see shots where you see the ceiling, you see those tubes. But they look natural. They look like they belonged. So I was very happy about that. And the batteries just lasted and lasted. The red light in the back, again, was kind of a happy accident, because that was the backlight for Caitlin, who was on the stage playing the keyboard. And that was one of the rarer instances of using tungsten Fresnels. And I think those were either 300s or 150s that we popped back there, hanging down from the ceiling. I think what they did is I think they put a polecat up, as a small area. So they put a little, an extendable metal telescoping polecat, and then they just hung those off of there. And you do see them a couple of times, and they look like, little lights, but it's like, oh, they're stage lights, whatever. And we put the red gel, and then it just motivated that from that direction. And so it was very natural in this shot to use it there. And then for the white light on their faces, again, I used the Astera Titans. I set them down on the bar, and I dimmed them down. And this looks like a production still, because in the movie that light's not as bright on their faces, and this is probably somebody snapped it while we were setting up. But it's just so beautiful, and I really like uplight. I really like the quality of uplight, but you have to be careful with it, especially with women you want to make look beautiful, because if you get the angle wrong, it's going to look like a horror movie. You have to find that sweet spot. And again, there's no formula. It depends on the person's face. It depends on the actions with the face. And with Lauren, what we did is we ended up pulling it just a little bit closer to Josh, to make it look nice on her. But I just love it. And then in the wider shots, we didn't have it on the counter. I hid it just on the other side of the counter, so she still kind of had that feeling of it. But when we went in for the close-ups and we wanted it to look beautiful, we pulled it out on the counter and we found that sweet spot. And then when we reversed for him, we did the same thing. We just pulled it a little bit away, and we did the same thing when we shot Ali Afshar for Leo, because he, as you know, comes into this scene. And one of the things I was worried about, and if I'd had time, I'd have fiddled with it, I was worried that the light on that jukebox was too bright, because it was kind of clipping out. And I have no control over that. I would have had to gel it, or I would have had to make my lights brighter. And Sean said, I'm fine with it, so we just let it go.
Great. This is looks like the Airbnb or the hotel that they're staying at.
Yeah, so this shot is in the movie. It's a place that Leo rents to put up Manny, because they want Manny to disappear for reasons that are revealed in the film. And that's the place that they're renting out. And I love this, because for one thing, the firelight. Now, in this, the firelight is just natural firelight. But when I went in for coverage, again, I used the Astera Titans, and I did the fire flicker effect on them. Because the fire is really not, once you get in there and you're filming, it's not bright enough to light the faces in a flattering way. Obviously, for the wide shots, I had to go with we didn't have a CG budget to paint lights out, and I had nowhere to hide them, so I just had to go with available light for those guys back there. Although, now that I'm looking about it, there may be a tube hidden down on the other side of that fire pit. I guess I don't remember for sure, but anyway, I love the quality of those Titans when they were doing the firelight. This is one of my favorite scenes in the movie. And the other thing is the night lighting, the moonlighting on Josh and the yard, and then in the reverse on Connor's truck. It's kind of hard to hit that sweet spot because You know, some people tend to overlight night, and I just, God, I hate night moonlight that's too bright and just looks absolutely fake. And then on the other end of that spectrum is the moonlight that's just so bloody dark, and it's like, you know, you can't see detail and you're struggling, and that might work well in a horror movie, but I think in a romantic comedy Christmas movie, that's just not the place to go. So, you know, I was very happy with the ratio here. I mean, it feels, you see Josh clearly, but it feels like he's dark. And I love the color shift between the blue and the warm. I think it's just a really pretty frame, and I was very satisfied with that.
Here we have the breakfast table.
The breakfast table, yes. So pretty sure this is one of the ones which was shot at night, and we put a silk, or not a, yeah, maybe it was a silk. I think it was a frame of diffusion, like 250 or 216 that we threw up in that window behind there. And then you see a sliver through the door of the other room, which not only did we have to put diffusion in that window, but I had to punch more light just to glow the ambience in the room so that it felt like daylight. Because if it was just the window lit, the room was dark, and you could tell that something was wrong. So it took a little more time than you might think to get this right. And by the way, you know, we were talking about this scene earlier, and I said we started shooting it in the daytime. So that ambient light wasn't a problem then in the other room. That was another thing that had to be added. The other thing about the diffusion, it wasn't on the window. It was backed away from the window because I have two M18s crossing coming through there with a little bit of backlight. So if I'd have put it up against the window, I would have lost that quality. Another thing is, I'm pretty sure it was this scene. It's definitely the scene when Josh leaves. When she grabs his hat, you forgot something. I put a couple of Astera Titans up on top of those cabinets because those cabinets did not go all the way to the ceiling. There was a ledge, and I put those Astera Titans up there just to give a little bit of backlight. And this is one of those scenes that Sean likes to talk about because there were so many people, and we had, because of the COVID regulations, you know, anytime we changed lights or moved the camera, they all had to be cleared out. So to make that simpler, the camera is actually outside that house. There's a sliding glass door and a back patio, and the camera never got closer than to push right into that door. And it never got wider, and it never got wide enough to see the frame. So there's a little bit of push on some of these shots. And then the other thing is, because the lights were outside the window, the guys could go and fiddle with them. And then those Astera Titans were on an app. So in terms of turning them on and off and adjusting the level, we did not have to go in the room. The only time we had to go in the room is when we went in for coverage and we popped the camera off the Dana Dolly and went inside, and then they would have to clear out. And that's a lot of people to clear out and bring back in. And then the front light, you know, just to create that ambience behind us, out the sliding glass windows, was a great big 12 by Ultra Bounce that was probably T-boned because it was on a porch. So you wouldn't have gotten the 12-foot height. So you probably just T-boned it and did, like, you know, 8 feet, 9 feet, whatever you could, and then popped a light into it. And I want to say that light was probably an Aries Sky panel. I don't remember clearly, but I only had two M18s, and if that's what's playing outside the front, then it had to be the Aries Sky panel creating that soft light. And this is another one of those scenes where I was a little bit nervous about that glare coming in that window. You know, I didn't want it to obscure, you know, Joseph's mom's face. And so we were just, you know, kind of careful. We would dial the level down because I still wanted it to be kind of blown out, but I didn't want it to be so bright that, you know, it was like fogging up her face. And again, it was one of the things that I worried about a little more than Sean did. And Sean's like, "It's beautiful, go with it." So, but that was a fun scene, and we spent a lot of time. It feels like we spent a half a day in that particular location because we had several different day scenes, and we had a night scene, and we had the masters and the close-ups. I'm sure that's not true. I'm sure we didn't spend a half day, but, you know, probably at least a good 3 hours, you know, just in that particular space.
And beautifully lit.
Thank you. Well, this is a triumph because, you know, this was another instance where just like the bar, my lights were going to be in the shot. And, I had to fight the urge because, starting out, it's a cardinal sin to have a light in a shot. And it's funny, I have to tell you a story. I won MTV VMA Moon Man for the Moby We Are All Made of Stars video. And there was one scene, when we shot that where he has got this kind of, long rock and roller hair, and he's looking into a mirror. And in the mirror, I didn't notice it when we shot it, but later on I realized in the mirror there's this little red Fresnel lens. I saw a bloody light, and I'm like, how did I miss that? And it was red because it was gelled, and I was just like, oh God, And when they announced on MTV that video had won for Best Cinematography, guess what clip they played? It was like just like rubbing salt into the wound, Here's your award and here's your fuck up. But anyway, nobody else ever knew or cared, and if they did, they're like, he did it on purpose. So I did it on purpose, everybody.
Right? Maybe you're mocking it. So,
but anyway, in the wide tilt down in this scene, you see both of them, which just, man, Sean had to reassure me. It looks like party lights. I'm okay. But what I did is when we shot them, because you're looking right at the light source, even though they're red to the naked eye, they clipped out, and so these white rectangles. And I asked Keith Roush, who did the color grade, I'm like, would you please create red rectangles and just track them so that at least the front looks red, which he did. So that's a fix that nobody would know, but I just thought they looked really crappy, all blown out. They were really good at lighting the space, and they were really bright, these bloody things. But they were not so bright that they put the rim lights on Callie and Joseph. That is actually Astera Titans again, on C-stands with the red lights, and because they're at the far end of a barn. So I'm bringing those Astera Titans around to just get that sweet spot and do that red. And frankly, that was all my idea. I was just like, that's what I want to do. And then we start this scene in reverse. It's daytime. And they come driving up on the golf cart, and then they walk just inside the doors, and this happens. Well, after we flipped around, the sun went down. So there was no front light. And I had to replicate this feeling of the glow coming in the door. And so the light on their face is not daylight. It's that same 12 by ultra bounce out the door with a light popped into it. And it certainly was not the Aries Sky panels, because both of them are playing. So it was an M18 that was popped into that. And because it's so dim, it must have been scrimmed way down and probably even closed the doors some, to waste some of the light just to create that quality. So that's what I did. And I liked it, but the highest compliment of all is that one of Maria, the still photographer's shots of this lighting setup is what Netflix used for their thumbnail and their advertising. And I'm like, that's just, you can't have a better compliment than that. And, you did a good job of picking some of my favorite scenes. There are some others that I really like too, but these are all some of my favorite lighting. And, like I was telling you earlier about how I love that this movie let me show off some different looks and different styles. I mean, if we hadn't had, the colors and the barns, if it was all in the house, we could get dramatic with it, but it wouldn't, you wouldn't have the color, you wouldn't have, that really dramatic range of different flavors. And so that's another thing that I really appreciate this movie for, is it really let me, have fun with a lot of different looks.